Please push the buttons, push the buttons. All right, please push the button. Push the button.
Yes, it's red, I mean green.
Push
Are
the
you,
button.
it's your microphone.
Okay, Paul. Okay.
Push your button, Paul.
Okay. Okay.
Should we start again, because now you can be recorded?
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, my name's Adam Geddes, and I'm a senior system administrator over at Blythedale Children's Hospital.
My name is Mark Barron. As I told Paul, I've been in the computer business for 52 years. I am currently a senior cloud architect with IBM.
Hello, I'm Ellen Hendricks, Councilwoman.
Francis Shannon, Councilman.
My name's Steve Robbins. I'm a project manager. Steve Robbins. I'm a project manager with Woodard & Curran Engineering and one of the town's engineering consultants.
Anthony Catalano, a senior principal and partner with Woodard & Curran. Thank you for having us this evening.
Hi, my name is Atul Saxena, and I'm an application architect enterprise-wide and develop applications for the users. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Christine Fong.
I'm Chase Fong. I'm a junior at Edgemont High School.
You can say it again since nobody.
All right, I'm Chase Fong. I'm a junior in Edgemont High School, and I've obviously never worked in a computer business, but I have a solid amount of experience in full-stack web development.
I'm sorry, I missed your name.
I'm his mom. I'm Christine Fong. This is Chase.
Hi, I'm Dennis Goodhart. I've been in the technology industry for over 40 years, and as of last week, I am a retired technology consultant.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hi, Victor Carosi, Commissioner of Public Works, Town of Greenburgh.
And we have a councilwoman-elect. You could sit up here.
You can sit with the grown-ups.
I can be a grown-up today? Yes, my name is Gina Jackson. I am Town Councilwoman-elect.
Bring some more chairs up. And we have Deepak Panya and Joe Lucchese. And the purpose of...
What a nice...
We could all sit at the table. We just have to be...
We just have to be friendly.
Why don't you shift down? Why don't you share the, no, yeah. No, yeah, maybe, and then, unless I switch.
So,
Well,
Shoot yours
yeah,
now.
right.
bigger table?
It's be in the kitchen, right?
So the purpose of today's meeting is to see if we could go from the 19th century to the 21st century in 6 months. To see if we could really use technology and make government as efficient as possible, taking advantage of technology. We want to. During the past few years, we've talked about the work order system, and I thought that we could hear today, what the next steps are, and then hear from this committee as to whether you think we're going too slowly or whether we're on the right direction, and come up with a plan. So a year from now, hopefully, everybody will say we're run the way government should be run. And that's not to say we're not running as a government should be run, but you could always do better.
And before Anthony, if I can, Supervisor, just give everybody a little bit of background of what we're talking about, why we're talking about technology with the Department of Public Works. It's actually an offshoot of an initiative that the town board started a couple of years ago to audit a department within the town and develop ways for efficiencies within the department and to better understand how the departments are working. The idea was to try to identify potential cost savings and say efficiencies, mannerisms, and how the departments function. And at that time, Woodard and Kern was selected as the engineering consultant to guide the town board through this process of looking at the Department of Public Works operation. Now, for those of you who don't know Public Works, in general, it's a fairly substantial department in the town. We encompass 9 different divisions and are responsible for everything from providing drinking water to about 11,000 customers within the unincorporated portion of the town. We provide sewer service, we provide highway department, sanitation services, on the engineering services, street lighting, radio communications, maintenance, repair for all our facilities, our buildings, our vehicles. Pretty much, a lot of we make sure everything happens in the town on a daily basis. So it's a. We'll figure it out. That was Monday's operation.
Tuesday must be built.
Thank you. So one of the first things that Woodard and Kern identified to us was a need for health and safety improvements. And they're just wrapping up an extensive program of evaluating all of our different divisions, the different safety issues that come up within the divisions, and offering us an approach to move forward with different training programs and things of that nature. Moving off of that, we really wanted to look at how the department functions and realize that it's time, as the supervisor mentioned, move out from the dark ages. We've been for historically a largely paper-based operation, and paper meaning I don't happen to have a piece of paper in, but literally scrap pieces of paper for work order generation, utilizing email, not the most efficient way to utilize email for communications. And we have really, at the end of the day, really no way of truly recording what it is we do, how we do it, and then being able to, once you start recording things, being able to benchmark it. So the concept here is to develop a system and to check whether they're, custom solutions or somewhat of off-the-shelf type solutions that can allow the department to slowly ramp up. It's a large department. It's got over almost 160 employees, so it's not going to happen overnight. But slowly begin to embrace technology as a way to track what we do on a daily basis and monitor the operations, and then slowly continue to hold asset management program for all the various facilities of the town. Now, assets meaning everything from our roads, our infrastructure, and then, of course, the vehicle. Well, the vehicles we already have a system in place for, but your buildings, everything that we do and touch on a daily basis. The idea is to begin to understand really what's involved, what our costs are, and then, long-term be able to use this data to help us run more efficiently. And I think, general oversight, Anthony?
Yeah, I think that Victor stole my thunder. So,
I'm sorry.
Really, everything you said, 100%, we agree. What we're going to talk about this evening, as it relates to asset management, really started from when we completed that study a couple of years ago. We commend the supervisor, the board members, the town overall, really, your commissioner and the rest of the team to work very closely with us to get where we are today. That study had a number of recommendations. As you heard from the commissioner, one of them was to further enhance health and safety procedures and protocol with the town, and specifically with DPW. And one of the other key recommendations was related to asset management and work order management systems as well. And the key driver behind that was to, again, as the commissioner said, to look to be more efficient in terms of overall operations, optimize what you have in terms of existing resources, staff, and use information in a way that you can make sound decisions. In addition to, which is very important as well, being responsive to the residents and overall customer service. And so having the information to be able to make smart decisions as it relates to capital improvements, repairs, replacements that are needed, as opposed to, for lack of a better term, winging it. And, as we say, managing by crisis, having the information you need to make those decisions, but also on being responsive to the residents. When you know what you have and you understand day to day how you're operating, you're able to get right back to your customers, the residents in this case, with information and be as responsive as you can. Not to mention the fact, as we see with, some of these storm events that we've had, just as an example, and the responsiveness that's needed in a very timely manner, as it relates to, disaster-type issues, and so on, it becomes even more important. So, again, we've come a long way since we've started this with the team effort, working together with the town, and, we'll discuss with you what we've done thus far, where we are today, and where we're going moving forward, and then any questions you have, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
May I ask a question just for my own clarification? So what kind of engineering is your company? Is it public engineering or?
We're privately owned. I'm one of the partners of the firm. We're privately owned. I'm one of the partners of the firm. We have about 1,100 people overall, 28 offices. Our local office is in Rye Brook, New York. We have core practices within our firm, including on the business side of things, what we call municipal and institutional business. And so when you look at, without getting into a long drawn-out answer, we have what we call SBUs, strategic business units. And there are different SBUs. One of them is municipal and institutional. Those different business units, we bring the different practice areas that we have to support those clients. So in the case of M&I, municipal and institutional, we have water, wastewater, working with municipalities. We understand their operations. One of the key things that makes Woodard and Curran different is, of the 1,100 or so people, about 250 of us are specifically involved in operations, whether it's operating water and wastewater treatment plants. In some cases, we actually, not looking to do that in the town of Greenburgh, but in some cases, we actually run municipalities. We're responsible for all of their infrastructure, maintaining them, managing them. And so we have an advantage of being able to, in some cases, when appropriate, bring some of those individuals to the table to get some unique insight. So it's beyond just us as designers, but bringing that to the table. So it's water, wastewater, municipal operations, environmental restoration, SCADA, instrumentation and controls, a number of different services that we bring to our clients.
And do you have an internal technology group?
Yes, absolutely. We call that group Intelligent Technology.
And they deal with networks and the technology that...
Yes, we do. And so unlike some firms, it's not like we have 2 or 3 people that dabble in that and do 100 other things. We have about 40 to 50 individuals within our organization, including 5 in our New York office, that are focused specifically on technology. So the answer is yes, and we, one of the leaders in that area in terms of, in the engineering industry. And one of the other reasons is because of the operations arm. As you would imagine, we collect a lot of data as part of the operations work that we do. And we look to take advantage of, newer technologies to leverage that and bring that to our clients. And so, in this case here with asset management and having that experience, we're able to bring to the table different opportunities or options that are available, having the relationships with different vendors for different softwares that are available out there as well. That allows us to work very closely with you all and have important meetings with them to understand what they offer and to ultimately determine what the right fit is for the town. And again, at the end of the day, that's the right approach. It's not having vendors come in and just listening to their sales pitch, but rather the approach that the town has taken is to first understand what their needs are, and then from there, look at the different opportunities that are out there and see what the best fit is for them, as opposed to the other way around.
Thank you.
When you say that, it's interesting. I spent a long time in the federal space, consulting to the federal, I'm sorry. I spent a long time consulting to the federal government and convincing agencies that have been doing business for 200 years in some cases to just sit down and do a needs assessment is a staggeringly difficult task. It really is. kudos to the town government for saying, hey, what do we need? Seriously. All right, let's put that comment into perspective. I spent a very, very long time as an officer in the Edgemont Community Council in the 80s and 90s and into the first decade of this century.
You could take him off the air now.
And the supervisor and I were more often than not on opposite sides of an issue. But I'm the kind of person that says, look, you're doing it right. And I think you're doing this one right. I really do.
And
And I ain't blowing smoke, I mean that.
I worked with a different kind of industries in the last 30 years and provided a solution as per the user's requirement, not the ready-made solutions. We have to make them efficient. Software is not for them, they have to use it. So it should be as per the user's requirement. That is the key to success.
You know, if I could just add on to that, which I think is a very important point here, and the town, and under the commissioner's leadership, has been very clear about this. During the course of this study that we've undertaken and then working together with the town on the whole asset management program, there's been a real conscious effort to have all levels of the organization involved, and that's critical. It's not just the management team, it's the, for lack of a better term, the boots on the ground, the day-to-day folks, the different user groups, so to speak, and getting their buy-in, and that's critically important. To come up with a solution that sits on the shelf is not going to do anybody any good. So you want to engage and want the buy-in from the different user groups, and the town has been doing that. And again, I commend the commissioner on that in his leadership in getting the folks to rally around.
But what I have seen we have to use an agile approach rather than doing everything once the study, and then we should start giving small chunks to the users. For example, if you want to computerize, automate one system, means the entire organization, go divide and conquer. One department computerize it, automate it, then next agile process, give them in a bunch so that they should feel that something is going on. It is for them.
Sounds like an agile scrum to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common sense. It's a common sense. And
Truly.
yeah,
Truly.
I use
One of the
tools.
banes of our existence, though, in technology is, well, we've always done it that way.
Yeah, IBM does it all the year.
You know, IBM is the best example. We are absolutely the children of the cobbler with holes in our shoes. Seriously. We have a whole plethora of tools, and not one of them is any good. The internal tools. I mean, they're arcane, they're hard to use, and we're trained technologists.
Can I just ask you, like, one question about the use of, say, a work order system? You know, we had an accident, a tragic accident in Edgemont, last week. Somebody died in a car accident. Now, there's some people who said, I brought up the issue of safety improvements, but they might have brought it up in passing. If we had a work order system and somebody, say, complained, to a department, say the police department, about, safety issues, say on Fort Hill Road, would that be logged, and would there be a tracking system? So this way, maybe, 3 years ago, nobody really thought that accident was, would be imminent or was really, that dangerous. But would we be, is there sort of like some sort of tracking? So this way, the board and I would be able to say, gosh,
Yes.
somebody made a request and nothing happened, and the reason's nothing happened.
Yes.
Part of that, though, is getting the user requirements. What do you
Yeah.
want the system to do? Do you want it to track something like that?
Yeah.
No, I would want it.
Yeah,
so
because
this
you need
is-
to develop a solution for this kind of problems which you are facing. So it should be as tailor-made for you.
So Supervisor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what may be helpful is for, one of the reasons why we're here this evening is to discuss what we've done thus far, so that you all can get a sense of the progress made and where we're headed. And then perhaps that may result in some additional questions after that. So
Okay.
if we could.
Do a presentation, or how do you want to do that?
We have that, but we could speak sitting
You
around
guys,
the
what do you,
table.
Yeah, if we could,
I'm happy to.
you know how to,
chat. Presentation's fine.
Isn't it-
They can figure it out, but
How long
maybe
is
just
the
talk.
presentation?
Anybody in technology here?
That'd be great.
We can,
That'd be great.
And then we could send you whatever we have, you know, in terms of slides or whatever separately to the commissioner, and you can share that.
Okay.
so I can see that. Sure.
And what systems do you use? What work order systems
We'll
do you
go
use?
through that. What we did is we created a short list of potential options for the town based on what we've heard your needs were, and that's what we're going to talk about this evening. Steve, our project manager, led that part of the study together with DPW.
And in the last 20, 30 years, I worked with the IBM technology most of the time. It is highly collaborative, and we can develop those solutions for any industry. It is not a rocket science.
Absolutely.
It is a simple. You create a discussion boards, and you can even trigger proactive, and you can trigger anywhere. For example, if you have some problem in Edgemont town, and it should be visible within a seconds to the police station or wherever you want to give them access, then the security comes into the picture. Who can see those requests? Whom it should, means who should be informed immediately. So, for example, if the task has not been completed within 7 days, it should escalate to the top management why it is not happening.
Right. You do a metro-
There should be some reason, and there should be a campaign about it, that, okay, this is the task, why it was not happened. There should be some reason.
So that's
attached to it,
just,
yeah.
right, so
Yeah.
that, I mean, so that's all good. I think that's really getting in the weeds
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Because there are so many things that the products that we're looking at can do. And so I think that if we kind of just go through what we've been discussing with the town and where we are, you'll get a better sense of the capabilities and where you can go. And I'm not saying it's endless, but there are many opportunities to continue to grow this. And as you heard from the commissioner, it is somewhat modular in that, you know, realistically, it's difficult to have a budget to do everything on day one. So it's important to kind of create a roadmap, so to speak, of, all right, how do we do this in phases? And it also allows you all, you know, to kind of have that shift internally from, you know, a certain mindset. You know, you heard how it's difficult to change that mindset. So gradually transitioning into a different way to think and how to manage is not easy, but if you do it in a phased way, it would be easier. So those things that you're talking about are all points that we've been discussing with the town, so.
So the general process that we followed here is to really start with a technology and needs assessment. So our staff came in and spent several days working with DPW staff from management on down to the labor force to understand how they manage their workflow right now. How does a request to do something, whether it's a routine request or an exception request, kind of a one-time issue, how does that get communicated and conveyed up and down the management chain? How does that information flow? What format is it in? How does someone know what to do, and how does someone else know that they did it? And what was done? So we spent a lot of time talking through those workflows to understand how the organization functions, where there are opportunities, and where there are practices that vary between the 9 different divisions in DPW. And again, it's a massive operation when you think about every sign in town is managed and fabricated and tracked in some way. Every street sign, every pavement marking, every catch basin, every manhole, every pipe in the ground, all of the water storage tanks, the pump stations that are the public's infrastructure here in town. And how that information about those assets, where they are, what they're made of, how it's maintained, what the materials of manufacturer are, and what work has been done on that asset in the past exists in a wide variety of formats, both in paper, some electronically, and some in the minds of the people who have been doing the work but are now ready for retirement. So you have a lot of institutional knowledge in the workforce, in the community, that we want to try to capture before it retires and walks out the door, simply because the technology tools and the systems haven't been there to capture that information in a different format for historical purposes. So we spent a good amount of time with DPW staff and with DPW management to understand what their needs are, how they would like to work, and where there are those opportunities for improvement. We looked at the existing technology systems that are in place, and there are several of them. For example, the equipment repair, is it the equipment repair that uses, there's a fleet management system in place with a piece of software that manages fueling and tracking of vehicle maintenance. There are other systems in place that are used to track inventory in different parts of the department. And then there are some specialty or kind of one-off pieces of software or in-house tools that are used to track very specific things. It might be maintenance in the water department pump station is tracked in a very specific way versus how the building maintenance division tracks its maintenance on all the HVAC units in all of the town-owned buildings. Kind of very specific, purpose-driven systems or pieces of software that are used, but they're very siloed. They serve a very specific function. They work well or not for that specific function, but they're not necessarily integrated or visible across DPW or up to DPW management.
It's not easily transferable.
It's not easily transferable. It lives in a specific place. It might be just a running spreadsheet that a foreman tracks, as opposed to a database type system. And of course, that makes reporting, which is necessary for the efficient management of the department and for being able to justify to the town council and to the public what work is being done by the town employees, possible but labor intensive to do. So we looked at both a needs assessment from what does the workforce and management need, what are the software products or other systems that are being used, where is there gaps in capabilities, where are there gaps in information, the base data set of mapped manholes in a geospatial context, does that exist and can that be used? To then develop that needs assessment and also looking at what are the key performance indicators that the department wants to use. What are the levels of service? What are the levels of transparency? And what are some of the more granular, this is how we want the department to run type issues? So we spent a good amount of time collecting that information, distilling that, looking for common trends, looking at peer municipalities and our experience with other municipalities to develop a list of about 10 software products that we then evaluated against that needs assessment. They're everything from custom developed solutions, including ones that Woodard and Kern has developed for other municipalities, to enterprise level asset management systems offered by several software companies, to solutions in between that might offer different blends of services, of expandability, of ability to be phased in to the department, and scalability as well. So with that evaluation matrix of different products, we worked with the department to identify 3 that we felt were best suited for the department's needs, and those are kind of the short list for more in-depth evaluation to really understand the nitty-gritty of how they work and which one the department is going to get the best value out of, which meets the department's needs in terms of cost effectiveness, results, and deployability in a phased approach. The proposed next steps for the project is we've done some initial meetings with the 3 vendors. We need to get a little bit more in depth. We kind of met with them to determine that they were the right fit and we were headed in the right direction before we spent a lot more time on it. Probably see if that can be narrowed maybe to 2 and really kind of dig in deep on those and bring that to a more granular level with the town's staff and workforce to make sure that the folks who are going to be using the software think that it adds value and they're comfortable using it on both desktop and mobile applications, and that the specific reporting needs for DPW management are met, and that it can be deployed in the scalable and phased way that the department would like. There are a couple divisions that we're looking at to start with. I think we want to spend a little bit more time before saying exactly which ones those are to make sure that those division managers are in agreement. But where there's a good opportunity blend between available data sets that can be used to populate an asset management system, so where is there that data that can be managed? Where is there a workforce division that is willing to be at the cutting edge of deploying this in the town? They're going to embrace it, and it's going to be successful. You never want to start with a part of an organization that doesn't want to be using it. So building some positive momentum there, and then scaling the deployment as in a parallel path. We're developing the data to be managed in the asset management system and developing the organization to be ready to use that system and deploying that across different divisions. So that, at a very high level, is where we are, and our next steps are really around that selection or narrowing of software and developing that initial implementation plan with a selected vendor.
Does Westchester County or New York State provide any type of guidelines or any assistance to municipalities to do this kind of project?
There's very general guidance on it. I think that the guidance very broadly is that you should, well, that each municipality and each organization is different. Yeah. And that the solution for one municipality might be different than the solution for the adjacent municipality. So to spend the time looking at the specific needs assessment of that municipality. There are some technical assistance resources out there for government at the state and federal level as well. EPA is certainly has some robust resources around asset management and guidance, and they kind of have their 5 key or core questions around asset management that we worked through with DPW as part of that needs assessment to understand levels of service and performance indicators and other factors like that.
Does the state make any requirements on the municipalities, certainly in terms of the fiduciary responsibilities, but in terms of health and safety as well? And the reason I'm asking is one of the bugaboos in lower levels of government are unfunded mandates. Tell me to go to over there. Okay, fine, give me cab fare and I'll go. Yeah. And the cab fare is never forthcoming. So I see that personally as an issue, not necessarily as a taxpayer, but as a systems integrator. You're telling me to do this, and this is what it's got to cost, and it's not in my budget.
At this point, it's really handled as a best practice around asset management. In terms of health and safety, there's obviously the state employee health and safety organization. What's the right acronym? PESH, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to add, only because I have the notes here from, you heard the commissioner mentioned earlier that as a result of the study that we did evaluating DPW operations, the different recommendations, one of them was on the asset management and work order management system side of things, but another was on the health and safety end of things too. And so, in fact, this board, this town, authorized us to move forward with developing a health and safety program. And so really enhancing what the town had been practicing previously. And in a similar way to the way Steve mentioned, the approach that we took was really to engage with different levels of the organization at on the DPW side specifically, and understand what their operations involved in terms of day-to-day activities and the safety hazards that would be in place. And I can get more into that. We may want to finish the asset management part of the discussion first. And, I could even just kind of give you an update as to what we've completed so far on the health and safety program side. We've made a lot of progress there too, and have rolled out the health and safety program with DPW. So we are at that point where we've actually started, some training, and we actually did a refresher already with some of the folks at DPW about a week or two ago, and really moving into the next phase of that knowledge transfer, so to speak, so that there could be someone at the town level that owns those requirements, right? And then certainly we could be there to support you all, but there always needs to be, a champion, so to speak, at the, in this case, the town level to own that, because there are a lot of moving pieces. Again, we could certainly help you in terms of updates. Things change constantly on the regulatory compliance side of things. Even doing an audit on an annual basis or quarterly or what have you, but to make it really work right, you need someone at the, within the organization, your organization, to own that. And given all the different responsibilities that we hear that, your foreman and department managers have, and it's just very difficult for one of those individuals to actually own it. And you can see when we have the meetings, they're like, wait, I'm doing all these other things, and, I'm responsible for, if there's an issue and something happens, then I'm the one that's the leader of that. It's hard, it becomes a risk issue, an exposure issue, and what's the right way to handle that. We've kind of started to have those conversations.
Would it make sense with health and safety to have, say, a company like, say, yours, do spot checks like occasionally during the year, without like notice, so this way we could see if people really are in compliance, and then you could provide us with some sort of updated report.
Yeah, we could, was that?
The answer is yes.
The answer is, the answer is yes, but in order for you all to be prepared, again, I'll go back to, there needs to be someone within the town owning that, so that people.
Train the trainer experiences for our workers, so that they could then further train our workers, so that you're not doing all of it.
Yeah, we're not there day to day, and we're not sitting in your office.
There's a hierarchy of training.
Yeah.
Well, certainly, plus you don't want to pay the fee to have them train everybody.
How far along with the health and safety are we, would you say?
How far?
Yeah.
Well, we've completed a health
But
and
I'm talking-
safety manual.
But how far in terms of the implementation, how?
Well, we've rolled it out to your staff, to your team. So we're at a point where there's a deliverable, there's a health and safety manual that's been provided to the town. And again, about a week and a half or so ago, we had a meeting with the department managers as a refresher of what's in that manual. Number one, so that they can continue to, spread the word and keep the eyes open for the things that they need to be keeping their eyes open for, but also so that they're prepared if there are other unannounced inspections at the state level. You want to know that you have that manual, right? That helps. And to be able to know what's in there, your people can speak to it. But supervisors.
When the inspector shows up.
Yeah, because if.
Very important.
Absolutely.
You know what to do when the inspector shows up, and
Right.
who to call.
If we didn't go through that refresher or go through the manual again, and probably do it again in another, a few months, but then you're right. Then if you have these inspections, unannounced inspections or audits at the state level, which happens, your folks will be, some may even say, I don't know if we have a manual, or, so it's important that you're prepared, and you paid for that, and you should make best use of that. But to your points, Supervisor, yes, we could do that. But again, there needs to be conversation internally within your organization about how, the town is definitely committed. We know that. But to further show that commitment, there needs to be that next step of who owns that internally, and it can't be a part-time job where someone that's responsible for all these other things, and then they have 3% of their time or 5% of their time. Oh, by the way, you own, our health and safety on a day-to-day basis. That's not practical.
So you feel that we should have a full-time?
I think that it warrants somebody to own it, and owning it doesn't mean a part-time job is the best way I could put it. It's not someone who's doing it 20% of the time. There's a
And
lot of
that
moving
person
pieces.
could do the inspection, actually, to make sure that there's compliance
So
throughout.
we don't have any, I think you had mentioned that this was something that you were advocating. So would you recommend when the board comes up with a budget, is this something that should be, added to the budget? And because I guess if we spent all this money on coming up with a system, we don't want it to gather dust and just to say, oh, we have a health and safety and not really implementing it.
I think it definitely warrants further discussion, perhaps at a separate meeting with myself and the board members about some action plans that we can consider. Again, it's a dynamic system. As recently Anthony's team delivered that product to us, we had this kickoff meeting a little bit more to get into it, and we're seeing some issues that we would like to talk further with the town board. I think there are opportunities, but I think, we need to further explore. And I'm more than happy to come back to the town board in a separate meeting and have that sort of discussion.
Yeah, we'd be pleased to support that meeting as well. I mean, you let us know if you need us to be part of that, we'd be happy to do that.
Right.
So,
Where you could maybe, in a few months, give us like an update, or maybe initially do some spot checks and then say, these are the weaknesses, and this is the next steps, just so we know that we're actually doing it.
so,
Is the plan general enough to roll out to the rest of the town, or is it very specific?
Specific to
To
DPW
DPW.
operations, the different departments that roll
Oh, I
up to
understood.
DPW. Yeah.
But could it be rolled out largely intact? And look, I'm a realist. Nothing goes from A to B without certain modifications. I get it. And if that's possible, and it becomes a town-wide program, does the town need to have a single, let's call him a compliance officer for the moment, or does the town need one in each of the major divisions?
Yeah, so someone that has those skill sets, you should be able to bring someone in with those skill sets that has the ability to be a health and safety officer for the town as a whole. Now, going back to your previous point, though, just want to caution that what we put together and the study we put together, you heard initially, the smart thing to do, similar to what Steve was saying on the asset management side, is to do an overall assessment of the existing operations and what those needs are. And that is specific to those departments, right? It's specific to DPW and the departments that roll up to DPW. So it's not easily transferable to, say, someone in the town hall building and, and what they're exposed to versus what the workers in the paint booth are exposed to. I'm using that as an example, but, so from that standpoint, no. But if there was a commitment to bring someone in who's a health and safety officer and they have the credentials and the skill sets to be in that position, then the smart thing to do would be to look at expanding their role to be handling other things as well. But I would also say that encourage you to coordinate directly with the commissioner on how that specific resource would be allocated, because you wouldn't want anybody to be slighted if, if
I understand that. I guess I phrased my question a bit incorrectly. DPW has an administrative function. They work in an office. The supervisor has an administrative function. They work in an office. How different can that be? And can you have a plan that's this big, but this section applies to this administrative and that administrative function, virtually unchanged? I mean, I'm not an expert in health and safety. God knows. I think it's a pain in the neck sometimes, I really do.
No pun intended, right?
No pun intended, no pun intended, but in my function, I'm not permitted to help the guy with the screwdriver lift a box. I'm not sure I understand why, but okay, I'll sometimes the regulations get in the way. But my point is, if you've got an administrative health and safety function in one department, in the administrative area, is that easily transferable?
You know, the commissioner has.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes, but, and again, I think we're migrating from a technology, but also, you know, there's always those opportunities, and any organization, you know, every now and then might want to evaluate its positions and how it's serving its people, but also to let you know that, you know, this was very specific as far as the health and safety goes to the unique operations of the Department of Public Works. Overall, though, the town has, in fact, we just completed some mandatory annual training, so it's, you know, and that's usually driven largely through our various insurance carriers and compensation carriers and through the comptroller's office. So then there's routine training for the office personnel on matters that relate to office work and different types of harassments and awareness training. So just don't want to let anybody, HAZWOPers, et cetera. So it's, the town is obviously is compliant in many of these areas, and it shouldn't be interpreted any other way. We're just highlighting additional specific areas within the large functional areas of the Department of Public Works. So, but I think we're kind of migrating from our technology concepts.
Well, it is and it isn't, because if you're recommending that or Woodard and Curran is recommending a plan for DPW that will then be federated out to and tweaked according, not tweaked, but manufactured accordingly for each department, for want of a better word, I'm tired. If there can be a single compliance order that is, officer, that is a cost function that is important for the town to know in buying into the whole thing, so.
No, I think it's a great concept. I think the town, it's definitely, you know, as the town matures and changes, these are things it could look into in its personnel and see if there's ways that position might be available. I wouldn't say no. I think that there are needs that are beginning to show up, and you know, but again, it's a balancing act that the town and your elected officials have to understand is how different pieces of this puzzle fit into the town's overall, and what are the best ways to achieve those. But definitely, one process that we're just now having those conversations is the concept of some type of on-board person that would have the ownership of this, and then extend the training to the various divisions, be a compliance officer, and work town-wide. Because not only do we have, you know, ourselves with DPW, but some of this training and some of these actions can also extend to parks and recreation.
Yes, exactly.
Other pieces of it can also extend to other of our operations, whether it be community centers, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, it's definitely something that can be built upon. We're right now just understanding what the foundational needs may be. Okay. And I wouldn't want to reach forward to say I need, but definitely we can vision that. We can definitely see how the information that we're beginning to put together and understand is something that will be built upon in the future with the town to really improve where we are. And I think that's what everyone's always looking to do, whether it's, you know, talking about our software system, improving them. In this case, we're migrating to health and safety, but the way we can improve it is possibly through these operations.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not arguing that at all.
No,
and I agree. But it is something to also keep in mind the end goals and the overall picture.
And in terms of like when you feel it would be fully implementable, you know, where, you know, because some people will say, oh, you know, we started this, you know, a couple of years ago, and it's, you know, and, you know, time marches on. You know, are we moving too slowly in terms of the implementation? And is there anything that we could do so people will feel that we aren't procrastinating, but we're, you know, I mean, should we have a timetable going forward?
So in terms of the next steps, Steve talked to you about that, and the timing of that, what would you say, Steve, where we get to a point where, you know, the town really has a preferred solution?
So I think
Time-wise.
we'd like to be working over the next couple of months on that more detailed software evaluation that's, you know, really driven by calendar schedule as well, to bring a few different vendors here to the town to schedule that around resource availability within the town, to spend time to make that right decision and make sure that both the town is ready for the technology in terms of infrastructure systems, in terms of staff, and in terms of data. and that the procurement process follows all the other requirements as well. A lot of these are GSA or other piggyback contract available for procurement, and that just takes some time to queue up.
Do you think also maybe we should talk about some of the general approach? In other words, when we're talking about software, there's some talk about, what we vision as far as the systems. And there's a need for the ability for the department to communicate to the public. People have talked about, your 311 style system, or really what that means is an ability for a resident, anyone who has some concerns, some questions, to have a singular point of contact and allow then that process to then be distributed within the organization. And what we're trying to do is find ways that we can have a system that will enable that concept, with information coming in. But because obviously we have a large organization and deal with many different people, how are we then going to deal with the information once we receive it? How is that going to get spread through our organization to the correct functional areas? And then what's the communication both internally that item is being addressed, and what's the external communication so a customer or a resident who had called in with the initial complaint has some way of tracking any progress that might be going? Maybe you want to...
Sure, yeah. The kinds of needs that we've discussed with DPW that are necessary for an efficient asset management system, there's many different components to that. Some of that is where is the infrastructure in the town, and can we find it, and what is information that we know about that. So there is a sewer pipe on XYZ street. It's 10 inches in diameter. It's made of cast iron. It was installed in 1952, and we have cleaned that sewer pipe every year for the past 20 years. And so we now have a maintenance history that we're capturing on that asset, and we know where it is, we know what it is, and we know what has been done on it. So there's that aspect of it. There's the work order management side of it, which is to say who performed that maintenance, how long did it take them, what were the materials that were used, so that you can plan out what's the backlog of maintenance work that needs to be done, how much of that work is corrective maintenance versus predictive maintenance, and being able to track that workflow for both regularly scheduled activities and new activities. And then there's also the ability to take in information about what needs to be done. That can be in the form of work that a foreman or building manager schedules and says, we need to do these 5 activities in the month of March because that's what we need to do to transition from heating systems to cooling systems. Or it could be taking in information from the public or from other departments about the town and its infrastructure and what needs to happen. So that all of the software products that we are looking at do have a public-facing module to them, both either integral to their software or through integration with other third-party software vendors, to be able to allow a member of the public, to say, there's a pothole on Main Street, near house number 57, and have that information come into the town and be filtered to, say, the highway department, to be able to overlap that customer request with maybe another public request that was in the same area for the same kind of issue. So now we know we're not dealing with 2 potholes, we're dealing with the same pothole. And that might overlap with a known service request or a known work order that the highway department is managing 50 potholes, and that's already one that we know about, so we're going to cluster that. We're not going to send duplicate resources out to address 50 potholes on one street. It's just one pothole that's been reported 50 times.
Is it on a Google map, or how they can visualize which they are working on?
So each software product uses a different GIS engine for that. And so that's kind of one of the particulars of, is it an Esri, ESRI-based package, or is it a Garmin-based package, or is it a Google Maps-based package? Those are all different, geospatial information system packages that are used for both internal use within the town for its asset management, and then also on the public-facing side as well.
So who's going to maintain those things?
So those are.
Or
Are you volunteering? I know.
you need
Yes. Well, first we
really
have,
good professionals to do it.
So it depends on what it is. So certainly, one of the current functions of a DPW and engineering operation is the management of geospatial data for its assets. And you would want that to be a function either within the town or that the town procures in other ways. So that there is a GIS, is the acronym system you do, certainly very robustly used in the assessor's office, for example, and used in pieces within the DPW operation, depending on the division and the need and the availability of that data. But to make sure that we know where all the town's assets are, and DPW has the advantage of having a lot of fixed assets. That pipe in the street is not moving very often, certainly not on purpose.
but its location is probably on an index card.
In some cases, or a record plan, that's an important.
In somebody's head.
Not too much in that
We actually
case.
have a very substantial,
Just
good
listen
map,
to him, yeah.
paper-based maps.
One of the things that we get into, that we've gotten into as a technology industry lately is concept of predictive analysis. I fixed this air conditioner now 4 times, maybe I need to replace it. Or
That's the life of a.
or we know the useful life of a particular product, and, it's 20 years, for instance, so 5 years out, maybe the guy at the head of the table needs a tickler to add some money into the budget to start building a reserve to replace that asset. I think that's a key item that's got to go into any kind of system like
Yes.
this.
That's exactly what we're talking about. We
Okay.
say data is king. At the end of the day, you heard us talking earlier about a part of our business is on the operations side. Well, we operate 50-some-odd plants across the United States. You know how much data we collect? You know how useful that data is to do predictive analyses and be able to establish trends over time and determine,
Great.
all right, well,
Key.
equipment needs to be replaced. You're right. What's the feasibility of repairing it versus replacing it? And being proactive as opposed to reactive with, repairs and replacements. So you're exactly right.
I have a couple of questions. We're starting with DPW, but there are a number of departments. You're looking at software that is particular to DPW, because now you've gotten into the weeds of DPW, but you don't yet know the other department needs. And I'm asking, is the same software federated out to the other departments and just tweaked for that, and how do you know yet based on the one granular look at the DPW department? And, because I'm assuming, you want them to talk to each other, so
Certainly.
you want them to be the same base. So that's it's multi-part question number one.
Okay.
And I guess you can answer that, just come back to me when you
Sure, of course. So as part of the needs assessment, we did speak with the IT department, we spoke with the assessor's office. We, through DPW, have information from the building department as well. And when we ended up evaluating all of that information, we're in a category of software product that's really an enterprise-level system that has a lot of that cross-functionality with other major software systems. So we're looking at, for example, the town uses Munis for purchase orders and finance. These software products all interface well and have established integration with Munis, for example. so that there can be other software products that are in use within the town that are all going to play nicely in the sandbox with each other.
Compatible.
As well as other modules and software functionalities that might not be relevant to DPW, but that might be relevant to other operations. Parks is a much shorter stretch for things like that than the police department would be, for example. So that's a little bit of a broader stretch and would take a little bit more, and I think that that's part of the next phase of product evaluation is we've found those products that have a broad set of capability and that will be good for DPW, and then what are the other externalities that we need to consider?
When
What
you're
about
talking
Municity?
about,
Does it work with Municity?
Yes.
oh, sorry.
I was just asking, does it work with our other software, which is Municity?
Unicity, certainly, you know,
What's that? What's that?
Great question.
Yeah, it is a good question with Municity, with Munis, with AssetWorks, which is currently used for the fleet management system. You know, these are all, they're all databases of information. And a lot of the difference in the software packages are the user interface and the unique tools that one software vendor may have developed that might be a little bit different than another, and how they set up their databases to be cross-functional with other databases that are common in municipal management systems. So you had another question.
Well, the other question is, you mentioned GIS system, the count.
GIS.
Yes.
GIS.
Geographical
Yeah.
Information System.
Yes.
So the count, my computer's getting tired of me talking about this, but it's my other hat. The county has a GIS system. Is that, and it is being upgraded because it was let go for a while. And now there's an intent and monies that have been geared to that. So is that something that you'd work with? And
So Westchester's municipalities have the benefit of a robust county planning department with a lot of GIS capabilities and a lot of data that they develop that is very useful to local government for its management. And so that is absolutely an underpinning of data availability that would be incorporated into a town's GIS systems and asset management systems, so that you're using that data in the analyses that you're conducting.
Which is what we use Westchester County data.
A lot of people try it.
And also, it has excellent topography.
Absolutely.
Even
Depending on what you're doing, but yeah, for planning purposes.
and depending on what you need, whether or not you need 2-foot contours or greater. And so what we need to do is to take the maps that we have and digitize them and somehow overlay them into our GIS system as a layer. And if we could have a different layer for the different types of infrastructure, well, the map is there. It's
Yes.
a matter of getting our assets
data
onto it.
has to be there.
And consolidating everything so it's in one location, really, so it's not in the basement or, you know, somebody's trunk or whatever.
And what
There's a
about-
couple of,
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
There's a couple of usage dangers that we have to consider as a community. Particularly, you buy a maintenance contract for a particular piece of equipment, and you look at the history 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and what do you find? It's been the most reliable piece of equipment you've got. You've never had a service call on it, but you're paying X dollars a year for that contract. Should I keep the contract or should I get rid of it? Well, fiscally, it says get rid of it, and I will assure you that machine will break the day it gets in the contract. Okay? It's just the way it is. So it's one of those dangers that we have to educate the user about. You know, yeah, it's been reliable, but it's an insurance policy you hope you never use, kind of thing. Okay? You know, I'm in the mainframe business, and a typical mainframe costs $150,000 a month for maintenance. $150 grand a month. and you can count on one hand the number of service calls you're going to have in the life of that machine. Service calls for problems.
Good business.
And you know what? Don't drop that contract, it will break. It's that kind of
I
thing.
will sell the software to other people too and be paid
Yep.
heavily to IBM.
Yeah, one of the things, the most popular piece of software was originally developed internally.
Okay, now my question is, since one town, second town, third town in our system, there are different towns, how are you providing the security? From the town, talk to the town, talk to the user. What securities are you providing?
Sure. So that's largely software dependent. These are all cloud-based packages, and they're, password or biometric controlled based on the software, and that's one of the factors that will be further evaluated now that we understand the core functionality that's needed for DPW. How are those access permissions controlled? How is the data secured? That's all part of that second phase of evaluation, but none of these are fly-by-night firms. They're all well-established software providers and hosting companies that have significant deployments and significant investments in cybersecurity.
We do have the advantage of.
Is that not your question?
No.
Okay.
My question is a little bit different. Paul is a top boss.
Yes.
He's a county supervisor now, for example.
Yes.
And we are all supervisor for a different town. Paul wants to see the entire picture.
Yes.
And I want to see my own town. She wants to see her own town, what's going on. And the department head wants to see their own people, how much security. And the unit person, the person who is working there, he wants to concentrate his own work. He doesn't want to see the other people work. Is that taken care of?
So is the question around, are there essentially dashboards or access levels of information within the software such that the supervisor, say, couldn't necessarily assign a work order to a staff person, or the staff person can't access information outside of their department? Is that the question you're asking?
The supervisor should be allowed to give him an access if he needs.
Yeah, and.
Oh.
Yes, so that's.
Well, somebody
We
should
can
be,
control.
not-
Administrative rights.
No, I mean that.
We can
I mean
control the
that.
access.
The-
Different position.
Yes.
Admin rights and.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds very like a classic role-based access
It's
analysis.
exactly what it
It's
is.
very similar to, the level of interest that you have in sharing information with the public. It's the same sort of thing, right? It's, all right, well, how do we, what information do we want the public to see versus not? Again, it's password protected. What I was starting to say is we also have the advantage of our own cybersecurity folks. I mentioned earlier, we have our own SCADA and instrumentation and controls and technology teams. And part of that includes having our own cybersecurity folks, which we need for SCADA, as you would imagine with some of these large plants. So we do have the advantage to, pick their brain and coordinate with them on some of these things too.
The question I have, because I don't have nearly as much technology background as anybody here,
Well,
is.
then don't be giving out permissions.
Francis, don't
The
give
question is, let's say I call DPW and I say there's a pothole in front of my house. And, you have the work order, but let's say, 5 days later, the pothole's still there. Could I log into, how would I be able to, with this work order system, be able to track, where my complaint is? Yeah. And how to.
That's the idea.
No, but,
Exactly.
and then when would we be able to get, and the question is, when would we be able to offer this to residents of the town?
I think ideally, the first phase in,
Pick the software.
yes, and to start walking before we run. Let's make sure that the selected software is.
You've never met Paul before, have you?
He likes to run. I appreciate that, but I think that there is a balance, and we have to be very specific about I think you want a public-facing piece of this in the initial deployment, and what what happens with that information will evolve over time and get more sophisticated as the organization gets used to using that data, to managing that data, and to making decisions on that. So I think that there's a very simple way to accept information from the public coming in the first instance, and growing to a more sophisticated tool that allows that incoming information to be routed in very dynamic
You see,
ways.
what I basically would have liked is, you know, I sort of feel that, like, I don't mind if we move, like, slowly, but, you know, what I don't want to see happen is that, you know, we all get distracted, and then, you know, 6 months from now, you know, we basically haven't progressed as fast as we want, and I'm wondering if it would be possible to have, like, some sort of timetable and say, you know, this is where we want to be, say, in January. This is a goal, like, in April. By, you know, by the end of next year, we're going to make this more available. We're going to start rolling out the customer service, you know, aspects. A year and a half, we're going to be here. And this way, if we have, say, quarterly meetings, then we could track, with this committee, we could track, and then we could say, you know what, we really are on target, or, you know, we're not. I mean, does that make any sense? And maybe
Project management
Call a
101.
project, project plan.
Yes,
And somebody to track it and allocate who's going to do what.
Sure.
you're impressed. You never thought I'd be
Absolutely. Question, and this is a run question, not a walk question. We talk an awful lot in the industry about shared services, shared facilities. Are these candidate systems you are looking at scalable up? I know one of Paul's dreams is shared services with the villages.
I think I think we would commend the town and its DPW for being a leader in implementing this kind of software solution. I think that it is underutilized within this region, and certainly among your peer municipalities. I think you are stepping out in the right way and leading on the issue, and there is an opportunity to scale across different government divisions for shared services. This would be certainly a good opportunity for that.
You know, that might be interesting because there's the state, they don't give grants for like practically anything, but they give grants for shared services. And you know, perhaps, you know, maybe if you could think of a way of applying for a shared service grant. We have, Francis and I are members of the Village Officials Association, and we basically meet every month with the villages, and I'm sure if they haven't started this, they'd be interested, especially.
Well, the county is rolling out
They
their
share
service.
information, you got FBI, you got state, local
Yes,
police.
that's what I
They,
was
all across the country, and they have to share that information, so.
Provided they can keep the T-band.
It's now 50 years old, but it's.
But I'm just
a good
saying,
idea,
it's,
really.
you know, it's advanced, I don't know the details, I'm not
But,
law enforcement,
My
but
point was, we all know that a 5-pound bag costs this amount. A 10-pound bag does not cost twice this.
Yeah,
And
there's
if I do
definitely
it and
synergy.
you do it, we've got 2 5-pound bags.
Are there other municipalities that you're working with in Westchester?
Yes.
There are, yeah.
And to her point, are you getting outside parties involved, like Con Ed, or?
Oh, God, my favorite company.
Because
Yours is
that's
doing
an
access.
issue, like a
Next to
pothole,
Cambridge.
No,
the
sewer.
power, you know, in certain areas of a town will go down.
Yep.
And people want to track, when is it coming up, and then you got 1 million people calling. It happened once to us in Edgemont, and the phone's busy, the Con Ed, everybody's calling. So it's kind of like if you had a system, like, okay, on this such and such street, the wires are down, should be up at this time. Then everybody doesn't have to call every 5 minutes, because
Well, that's,
So-
Con Ed is upgrading
They-
their system to
they-
do that.
Con Ed
Or
does
so they
this,
say.
does a lot of that.
But
they're working on improving it?
Yes.
Even on.
I'm sure, because they get scolded a lot.
No, they
Well,
talk about, they have an outage,
They're
they
actually
have like
better
a
than-
map, you know, you press
They
it.
have a
They have
map?
an outage man.
Now, coming
They
back
do?
to the
Yeah,
question
Con.ed.com.
what he asked,
It's not
But
accurate.
is it accurate? Because
Well, yeah, they're working on that because in the last storm.
Is it accurate? Sometimes. The last major outage
For
we
the
had,
minor
they said
ones, they
there's
are.
4 customers without power, and I walked outside, and it was dark as far as the eye could see.
Yeah, but I was just at a conference at Con Ed, and that is because that was one of the major issues of all the municipalities,
That's a big
obviously.
issue, yeah.
So they are working on that.
So would you be able to get us, like, say, a proposed, like, timetable?
Yeah, so let me just, and then Steve will
Go ahead.
elaborate on the assets and infrastructure and Con Ed, but, let me first just address the consolidation or, regionalized solutions, so to speak. And you're right, the state does look at it very favorably. Our grant and funding team has discussed that with us. We have routine meetings with them so that we can talk to our clients about those opportunities. In fact, we've issued a few memos to the town about funding opportunities for different types of projects for you all. So we will have Laura, our lead planner and grant and funding manager in our Rybrook office, go back and revisit the opportunities that might be available that potentially could help fund some of these initiatives that we're talking about. It's a big buzzword at the state level. It's looked at very favorably, and you're right, Supervisor, that there's a better chance to secure funding by doing those things than by not. There are challenges associated with that. I mean, a lot of municipalities play close to the vest when you start to try to work together and collaborate. But we'll look at that, and then we'll get back to you on the grant and funding opportunities. So as far as the timetable, that's not an issue. We've done that with the other assignments that we've done for you all, with key milestones to serve as a roadmap for us and track progress, and we'll take care of that. That's not a problem.
And like when you ultimately, say, a 311 would be, I mean, that's a little
Yeah.
bit a distance. What would you say would be like an estimated, say, timetable when you think we would be ready for consideration of that? Are you talking, how many?
Yeah, I thought we were just discussing, it's probably something we want to talk about with the commissioner, given where we are right now, just to see how we want to pace ourselves and at what point, next year, or at what point in time we'll be able to go ahead and do that. I don't think that we're prepared to go and answer that right now.
Right, but I'm saying just in my own mind, because I'm thinking of what you said about my personality. So should I sort of figure, somewhere like are you talking about a 2-year range?
It's not, it won't, personally, I don't think that it'll take that long. I think that when we put the schedule together, you'll see it in the schedule, and
You should just know, it's definitely, it's the goal of us is to be able to have, obviously, we want to provide a much more public interface to everybody, get the public more involved and more aware of what we're doing and following up. It's just we have to make sure we've got the baby steps going first, because otherwise, if we're going to roll something out, it's great, you could send us all these work requests, but I have no way of addressing them, then it's going to be a big failure.
I just sort of feel, I
But it's a goal.
don't really have any problems, with like a rollout that takes time.
Yeah.
But I sort of feel that if we say to the public, you know what, we're not there yet, however, we're moving in a direction, but we're moving very carefully, and we want to roll it out so, it actually works. And, if we say it's going to
You can say
take
that now.
2.5 years.
We are working towards that.
It's tough to get a clear-cut timeline, though, because I was a project manager, and you're gonna run into obstacles, and you're gonna run into issues and new things new technologies maybe, or new issues that come up. So, new requirements, exactly. It starts with the requirements, but you have to have the plan, it's ongoing.
The scariest example we could cite about, it's going to be on November 1st, was healthcare.gov.
Right.
But then, so many.
CMS blew that one so bad,
So wait a
because they had unrealistic timelines.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to oversimplify it, but one way to look at it is, and the commissioner said it best, in order to be able to share information, you have to have the information to share, right? So it's about populating everything, and Steve talked about getting the mapping consolidated, your GIS information. We talked about your assets, right? The buried infrastructure. The last thing you want to do is prematurely open something up when you don't have something meaningful to share where you can be responsive. So that's the piece that we want to discuss with the commissioner a little further, the timeline around populating what we need to populate with the right information so we can share it.
Are there any other initiatives that we're not taking that you think we should be taking in terms of, having a government that is, technology?
I can tell you that's what's linked to asset management, and again, this is a conversation we have to have with the commissioner, but part of populating what we're talking about here is to understand what you have from a condition standpoint, from a capacity standpoint. Those are the things that we would need to discuss with the commissioner to understand how much information currently exists, right? There are municipalities, communities that we work with where we need to go and define the conditions of the buried infrastructure, your water lines, your sanitary sewer lines, so you can develop capital plans and budget accordingly over time. And it's not, well, this force main broke, and you deploy someone here, again, managed by crisis, as opposed to having a plan in place and saying, all right, well, we estimate this network of pipes have about X number of years remaining of life. Let's develop a capital plan around the replacement of that versus your water lines versus your stormwater lines. So it's really about coordinating with the DPW and understanding more about how we can attack that. And that's one area where we would want to look at very closely to better define what you do have, your assets.
Would it make sense to like schedule a meeting, say in, I'm saying 3 months, and just see, where we are now and where, the progress we've made, say in the next, 3 months, and this way, we could track.
Yeah, I'd be happy to meet with you in a similar format.
Would that make any sense to people?
Yeah.
One more question. Since Paul talked about the incident, for example, fixing some of the pothole, and he wants to monitor the progress, it is covered by your software, right? The entire. For example, as a person, I said, I went to their website. I said, okay, I'm having this problem. And when I go into my revisit, next time, I want to see where it is the progress. Tracking. And he wants to manage his own people to see what they are doing, and I want to see what has been done last time, how many days it took to fix that.
Or another good idea
Yeah.
too is when it snows in the winter,
Yeah.
and I think we're gonna have a bad winter, to know what streets have been plowed.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Without
one.
having to
Yeah.
go out
Yeah,
and
yeah.
see,
But
you know.
that was another point
That'd be a
that,
good idea.
Good idea.
But let me, I just had,
Just a
I'm
moment,
just thinking of another thing.
while we're on this one.
I'm just asking,
Yeah, so as soon
Well,
as
we do. We already
XYZ
have that.
street's done.
But I wanna-
let's say,
my question is-
let's,
Here's my,
Yeah,
we
let
do
me
have,
know.
we do have GIS on our vehicles, and we would want to pick software that, when we want to, during a snowstorm, for example, we might want to turn that on so that it's displayed, similar to what New York City has.
Yes.
And so that,
It's one
that's,
of many, many factors that we,
will go into the software
Yes.
selection. Okay.
but I'm just sort of thinking, let's say you come up and say, I want a sidewalk in your neighborhood, but, most of us really don't feel that it's that dangerous, and it really is probably like a low priority, the police aren't giving it a high priority, Public Works, because it's low down. But let's say 2 years from now, there's an accident, on that street. Would we be able to use, is there a way of using, this system so we could track to see how many complaints we got, and maybe, just so we could analyze, are we not taking these complaints seriously enough? Do you follow?
There, I don't know if you remember, there was not even sidewalks on Central Avenue.
Yeah.
And
No, they're starting that.
They built sidewalks. When I was in 8th grade, years ago, my friend, who was in 8th grade, was hit and killed on Central Avenue, because somebody just swerved, and there was no sidewalks. He was walking into, I don't know, some get-together. But after that, when it's too late, they built sidewalks.
Well, humanity has always locked the barn.
Right, no, but I'm just
My best
trying,
friend,
I'm just
you know,
trying,
young kid,
I'm just
8th
trying to
What year
figure
was that?
out, like, if there's, like sometimes
year was
people
that?
will say, oh,
Excuse
I
me.
really, like I'd be
What year
curious,
was-
say,
what
on the
year
Fort Hill
passed
thing, I'd be curious, how many complaints did we get, say, in the past few years? And right, so the question, yeah, and this way it could sort of help us, going forward, because we could really analyze the data and our responsiveness.
To that particular complaint, yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Yeah.
why you're doing what you're
Yeah,
doing.
means to make the people aware, okay, we are working on your item,
Yeah.
and we are, means what priority level we are giving it to them, and we can report to the user, the person who has made a complaint,
Yeah.
okay, I need this, but we didn't take seriously, that's why the accident happened.
Now, have you found with all this,
Big Brother is
you know,
watching you.
speaking, from the standpoint of like a lawyer who never practiced, is there liability, more liability, because now, there's going to be it's going to be so easy to track all these, all these complaints?
That's why you put a disclaimer, we don't guarantee a certain time.
You've
But
got
we
a-
have it in the system, and it's logged in.
Yeah,
We
we will
we
get back to
appreciate
you.
your input,
think-
but, a disclaimer.
I think the advantage that something like this, sorry the advantage that a system like this has is that information is more visible and actionable to allow what is currently a high-functioning organization in DPW to have that information in a more actionable way, to know that that's an issue, to deploy its limited resources in a prioritized way, because that issue is more knowable and more actionable than a receptionist taking a message, putting it on a Post-it note, giving it, leaving it on the desk of someone who is out doing something else at the moment. So I don't want to open doors of liability, but really, the department prioritizes the work it does all the time. And this is an exercise in giving the department the best
By
information
necessity.
to make those discretionary decisions and to deploy the town's resources in the way that,
Put
that
you
the
in a better
management sees
It
fit.
does beg the question, though. I report a pothole on Main Street. Now the town is aware of it, or the municipality is aware of it, and not New York State. And I hit that pothole 2 days from now, and I tear out the axle in my car. The town's liable for that because they've been on notice.
No.
Is that the question you're asking?
That's not exactly
That's-
true. I
that's-
spoke to the
That's
attorneys.
risk.
No, but we talked about this. If you have a policy in place that you're following because of your limited resources, you have a defense for it. If you don't follow your own policies, then you don't.
Agreed, but
But
these
you're
kinds
not-
of things
you're not-
are actionable.
But it's not high, you didn't increase the actionability of it.
Okay.
If you put it in line and it
Okay.
was followed and the policy was followed.
Well,
If you
you
don't
get-
follow your own policy, that's a different issue.
Where you get in trouble is that you have the number of potholes that have come in, and you decide, well, this particular pothole, which is not on that list, is in front of somebody who's prominent, we're gonna go and fix that, instead of following your policy and going in the order that they come in, then you have an issue.
The potholes in front of my house always get fixed.
Anthony, I have a question.
Must be why I have a crater in front of my
I
house.
have a question. The public-facing portion, is it strictly aimed at DPW? So that when these three companies are picked or chosen, if somebody goes to that portal to enter in, could they ask a question of the assessor's office or the building department? Or is this going to be rolled out just for DPW issues?
Well,
It's a good question. I think at least initially, it would be focused on DPW would be my advice. But to the extent that there are opportunities to use that portal for other purposes, even if it doesn't have the same level of sophistication that DPW might be using it for, that's certainly a valuable opportunity to explore. So I think that's a good point, and we'll consider that in further discussions.
Because the tracking of emails coming in through the
Yes.
website to be routed to the correct location based on
Yep.
maybe a group of FAQs. You know, I have a question, you go in, you click, I have a question about star or something.
Yep.
That would get routed to the assessor's office or something. I mean, it'd be nice if it was a single portal, and even if most of them got routed to the DPW, but if they could be routed somehow to those other departments where they have a better chance of being answered correctly.
Yeah.
It's like a help desk, you
Yeah.
know, things come in for a tech help desk, let's say, for example, I've worked on.
They're routed, yes,
Write
where
a
it
ticket
should go.
and you send it
It's
to
the,
whoever's.
it's the 2 o'clock question in the morning.
Yeah,
Somebody
yeah.
can't sleep and they want to do it, we don't want to have to,
Yeah.
we'd like to give them some information off the website.
The other question I had about a public-facing part of the system, is it inquiry only or is it data entry? And the reason I ask about data entry, there's no way that I, as a layperson, can give him the information, the technical information he needs without talking to a human first. So, I've got, personally, I have a problem with public-facing systems that allow me to enter the data directly without guidance.
Well, maybe it's a format that you have to fill in.
You know, as Paul knows, I used to live at Boulder Ridge, and I was the maintenance chair. And I tried to put together a
You live near
database system
Paul?
once, about 20 doors down, actually.
He was the one who tried having me evicted.
Now I understand why.
Yeah, because you got your sweat on the damn gym equipment.
All right.
But my point was, I tried to come up with a maintenance system, and for the life of me, I couldn't come up with the appropriate categories. And I'm not the dumbest kid on the block, but I'm certainly not the smartest kid on the block. And I just couldn't come up with what we needed to tell the maintenance people needed to be repaired, because it's just not my skill.
No, that's a very interesting question, and I know you'll probably add on. That's actually, when we're talking about the whole idea of what type of software systems, why we want to go slowly and how they're going to be set up. Because one of the challenges that we have could be as simple as we'll use a proverbial pothole. And how it's reported, and it might be reported by 5, 6, 7 different people. But just as you were talking about the accuracy, perhaps somebody might say it's in front of 1 Main Street. Somebody else might say, well, it was in front of 3 Main Street. Somebody else might say it was across from 4. It all might be the same pothole, but they're all giving us different information.
Exactly.
So some of the challenges that we have with the software systems, and some of our demos actually talked about this, how they might try, depending on what is being reported and how, some geospatial information, and they might, and some of the software systems, we're talking about some interesting algorithms that they're trying to do to understand, is it all the same or not? And then other pieces is, we talked about how some might actually have a front end where it might be for my own staff to begin to have a series of questions to help to drill down. So if you call in, for instance, they may go through a series of inquiries and to try to help better focus on information. But it's definitely, I think, one of the challenges that a 2 a.m. in the morning software system might have, and why we really have to make sure that any program that we implement is going to be helping us, not creating a greater workload.
I had another question, just in terms of, the budget issues, because the board has to approve a budget, by December 18th or so. Where are we in terms of funding what we have to fund in the 2020 budget?
Well, again, this is a multi-year, multi-stage process. I think we're still trying to figure out, the right software systems that the town wants to consider investing in. There is some money in there for continuing services with Woodard and Curran, and we have to talk about the scalability. We talked about these are systems or enterprise systems. That means we can begin to get into this system, but may not need the full system just yet. So, right now, there's some numbers that are thrown out there, but we're trying to just be able to get some seed money started, and that's what I have in one of our budget lines. Don't ask me where, because I just don't remember. But we do have some.
I'm wondering if, because if we want to really, move this, forward, say in 2020, would maybe you be able, we have like 2 weeks to review the budget, because it may make sense, if we put in more money and it turns out that we don't need it, it doesn't hurt, it's not going to, we'll use it for salary. No,
Give yourself a boost.
We'll basically, put in the fund balance or whatever, but I just sort of feel that, that, I really I want people to see that we're really serious about this. And, I'd rather, say, what, we're gung-ho, we are committed to this, this is going to be implemented, and again, if you feel we're putting too little in, we should just make modifications.
We'll coordinate with the
Yeah.
commissioner and advise.
One more question. What the,
That's what I'm saying.
the question where he said the pothole is front of my house, his house, and somebody else's house. How are you solving this problem?
Each different piece of software has its own algorithm that tries to cluster that and find a way. So it's not my programming. It's not something that Woodard and Curran has developed. Our role here is really to be an advisor to the town to help select from a really broader set of criteria and help guide the implementation of that. So, they all use different algorithms and tools, and I wouldn't be able to speak to that efficiently. I think for all of to leave that question for a moment and to address your question or your statement, Supervisor, about moving forward aggressively, I think it's important to be mindful that this is an organizational change. We're really changing behaviors of people who have been in positions for decades and who have worked a certain way and who have some of which are embrace technology and others it's going to be more of a struggle. We certainly have we have always, right? And so I think I commend the DPW leadership and all of the staff that we've spoken with who have been very forthcoming to us in terms of recommendations for how to move forward. I think it will be successful because of the staff you have at DPW, but we have to recognize that the best analogy I've seen to rolling out an asset management or work order management system is you're trying to paint the car while you're driving at 60 miles an hour.
Okay,
and we have to be.
You like that?
It's true. You're really kind of stepping into the middle of a workflow. Those potholes are getting filled. We are capturing that information. Now we're going to change the direction that information is coming from and what else you need to do around that activity. And so it will certainly be, the success of this program will be no small amount due to the willingness and investment of time and learning capacity that's inherent in DPW staff.
And also credit to Victor and his staff. Generally, since I've been here, most of the complaints, the pothole-related complaints, are fixed, usually the same day or within the day. I practically never have gotten complaints, oh, the potholes have, there's been a pothole reported and it's still there.
Yeah.
It's sometimes, within an hour or within 2 hours. And we also, using technology, the town board authorized maybe a year ago the purchase of a hot asphalt machine, which nobody has. And during the winter months.
You can't- Other people have it. It's just-
Almost nobody. Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
We didn't get the one and only truck that's ever been built.
Right,
It's almost like once it gets rolled out,
Right,
you're gonna figure out what's prioritized, the priorities.
I think the
most serious, is, like you said, the potholes, I don't see that as a big deal. Somebody reports it, why are they what are they, blind? They can't see it, it's the number or something, and it'll be in the same area. So I wouldn't put that on the high priority list, like for example, the post office, that's a mess. The one on Central Avenue.
Oh, yes.
That is a mess. I get mail from people in the Bronx.
I got a letter from somebody
it's not even
yesterday.
And everybody complains about
I got the
that.
same a letter to somebody on Claremont Avenue in Mount Vernon a week ago. I returned it, and then yesterday I got another letter to the same in my house to the same person. I don't know why. How they.
I would be leaving for work, and I put. Obviously, it's clear. I put it right in the mailbox so the postman can see it, and it clearly says, and he'll just put the new mail and keep that one in there. He doesn't, sometimes he takes it, sometimes he won't.
If
And
we're
I
gonna-
think their issue is, what I heard, I don't know, maybe you told me, on Nextdoor or whatever, that that particular post office, they don't have designated people to deliver the mail.
It's all part-timers.
They just, part-timers, whoever's available, that's why it comes late, and they
We
just,
get-
that's, I mean,
If we're gonna try-
sometimes I get 7 o'clock at night.
If we're going to try and solve the post office, we might as well get the turkey and put it here, because we're going to be here until Thursday. But Paul, I didn't want your point. I jumped in because you said nobody else has it. But your point is that we do have the asphalt machine for the reason that in the wintertime, we can still fill potholes. And so we're constantly, so we have a lot of good stuff. We have a lot of good assets. And that's the whole idea behind this program, is that we can document it and use them efficiently based on the reports that are coming in.
Could we schedule, like, oh, I'm sorry, you had a question?
Yes, there are, Greenburgh, what do you call it, the garbage collector, they enter into our complex from the wrong side, means entrance. They have to come from entrance, not from the
Excuse me, you have to put that on the
Yeah.
public portal?
No, I'm
Send
saying
that
that
into the
how-
system? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm saying,
Take video.
because,
be the first
if something happens, not today,
Like a head-on collision.
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
coming
something,
in, somebody's going out.
so these kind of things we need somewhere, some repository where you have a knowledge base, okay, this is a critical things that can happen in future.
Right, because there could be a complaint, 99% of the time is no problem, and then that one
Well,
person may hit the.
you-
Underhill and
Underhill is-
Fort Hill.
Yeah,
The point is, I don't know how accurate it is, but I think the statistic now says we generate, as humanity generates more data in a day than it did for the first 10 millennia of its recorded history.
I
The
would
question that I have then, let's assume that it's an accurate statement, what use are we making of the data?
Right.
It's one thing to have it. It's another thing to understand it, but the important thing is how to use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
Taking an action against it.
And,
Would we be able to schedule like a meeting for, like a tentative one, say for the first week in March, and then this way we
It's a
could
little
basically.
far out, isn't
Well, you give me a time when you think it would be, could be the first week in February, I don't care. But basically, I just want to feel that we're really, moving forward.
And we can talk about elements that are going in and all of that.
Yeah, so
that's a good idea.
when would you think would be a good, a good potential time?
When do you think that you would have a deep dive on the software? March?
I think March is setting periodic updates, and then they can do what they gotta do on
So-
their end.
March is a good time, but in the meantime, we will put together that estimated schedule for you as well.
So, look,
Yeah, I have a question. Are these products you're looking at able to be run in-house on the town's equipment, or is this going to be service-based?
It's typically service-based.
So IBM cloud or which cloud?
Depends on the
Doesn't
software.
matter.
And who owns the data?
The town owns the data.
For each one of these, we're going to ensure that we get the data, and if we ever switch, we will get it in
That's one of the key
readable
things
forms.
is, yes. That we want to make
Asked
sure
all the
that,
time, for
that the data that's gathered is movable between platforms should the town change.
I think what we need to do is pick a platform and then find a provider who can
Yeah.
provide the platform.
The best platform, yeah.
so,
That's very
I
important.
think that's the way you have to go with this. And look, I'm in the IBM cloud business,
I didn't
and
know
I've sold a
that.
lot of Amazon.
AWS is the biggest, and Microsoft is pretty big too, they just.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
They just got the
But
Pentagon
no,
contract.
my point is, I worked in federal space and federal
there's a-
cloud space for a long time.
what about,
We sold a lot of
what about
Amazon.
March 3rd? I don't think that there's holidays.
Yeah, what holiday? I'm trying to look to see what
Some-
holiday it is,
My-
but St.
my-
Patrick's Day is the week after, the
I
7th.
think there's some school holidays somewhere, in March, I don't know. My wife had something down,
I don't have to worry about school, it's my
See over
son's
here.
problem, my daughter's problem. Worrying about school.
So it's definitely on a Tuesday, Supervisor?
oh,
Maybe you sure that's not your
March 3rd.
March
So-
3rd, March 3rd works?
So why
What
don't
day
we?
of the week is that?
Tuesday,
Tuesday,
first Tuesday.
March 3rd.
Same time?
How do you work this thing?
Yeah, I think that. Everybody a chance
I
to
believe you.
make progress.
You
And,
look so serious.
Say 7 o'clock?
yeah.
That's why I like,
We'll have a sidebar.
IBM Watson.
You have to have a sense of
Watson
humor.
fix
Is it the
this
same time,
problem.
7 p.m.?
Yeah, and maybe if you could get us even like a draft timetable before or anything, then I could send it to everybody on this committee.
Yeah, sure, Anthony and I will, we'll
And
work
some
with you.
pizza.
Yeah,
Yeah, party also.
we'll have a party.
Yeah, pre-birthday party for me.
Okay,
Because you never know how long it's gonna be. I didn't, not that I'm
I'll
sorry.
stop by.
Oh, just had
I get pulled out.
I thought this meeting was gonna take like
I actually
5 minutes, so.
Yeah, 5-minute meeting, right.
No, we don't need any party, but we need seriousness.
So thank you. When have you ever been
Yeah,
to
it's-
5
Time I get here now.
Now by the time it's past 10.
Got it. You're right.
I'm not actually
Right, so
meeting,
we,
most of my like one-on-one constituent meetings are.
because we have somebody in the control room, can we let her go home?
I have this appendage.
Paul, are we adjourning?
Yeah, we're gonna adjourn.
All right.
This is good, I really
Turn us
appreciate,
off.
I appreciate everybody's time.